I'm going to add the most basic of reverbs to this track. This is the free reverb that comes with all Pro Tools Reverb. It's a very simple interface. When listening to the sound, you want to adjust the wet to dry balance to where you want it to be. The two most basic reverb controls are decay and pre-delay. As I adjust the decay, you'll see the reverb holds out for lesser tones and lowered, and holds for a longer time as I raise it. Pre-delay determines how long it takes before we hear the reverb. You can hear that the early reflections are delayed by this. The other controls you see here are controls that adjust the tone of the reverb. There are also a number of presets. You'll see that when you select the presets, it adjusts the parameters below. Like with every other plugin, if you click where it says factory default, often they will have a whole list of presets. Presets are usually great starting points. From there you can adjust to get it more the way you want it to sound. Another reverb that we use quite often is space. I'll open an instance of space mono to stereo. Space is different in that it's an impulse reverb, meaning the reverb is created through sampling spaces and acquiring the reverb of that space. That's why you'll notice there are often pictures that accompany the presets. These are the actual spaces where these reverbs were acquired. To select a preset, you would double click on it and you would see that orange dot next to it, meaning that preset is loaded. The wet and dry is handled differently in space, in that instead of one slider going back and forth, you have a fader for wet and dry parameters. Next to that, you have the decay control. The decay doesn't allow you to go more than the actual space decay, so you can't get a really long decay if that didn't initially exist in the space. But you can lower that. Two other controls that you see on a lot of reverbs that you'll see on space are a control over the early versus the reverb or late reflections. Early is that initial wave of sound that comes from directly bouncing off the surfaces, and the late is the interaction of the many bounces back and forth that create the decay of the sound. I've been adding all of the reverb as real-time inserts. I want to show you a peculiarity of doing reverb as an audio suite where you render the clips. So looking at the audio suite interface, you'll notice you have the preview button at the bottom, and it's how we listen to it. So instead of playing from Pro Tools, we'll click on the preview button. So because this renders the clip on the timeline, we need to make sure of the selection that we select when we hit render. For instance, we'll make this a longer decay. And you could hear in the looping the decay gets cut off. So if we render it at this, just the selection, and play it back, you see that we cut off the decay. Because the clip is only 1 second long and the decay is 9 seconds, so we're cutting off 8 seconds of the decay. So what you'd want to do if you are using a longer decay as an audio suite, you'll need to make sure that you select the clip as well as something after it to accommodate the decay. We have a 9-second decay, so I want to make sure I have at least 9 seconds selected. We could determine a selection by looking up here where we see length. That determines the length of the selection. So do 9 seconds. So now if I render this, we capture the entire decay. To do this, however, you do need to make sure that the settings in the Audio Suite plugin are set to continuous file and entire selection.